I have approached this, and whether it's right or the wrong way to do it is, I am not going to be specific about my business model until I know exactly what's working.
So welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Deborah Kan, who is the founder of Being Patient. It is a new media company that is basically trying to help those with questions about Alzheimer's to answer those questions about the research. She's trying to develop a community. It's really engaging and learning from a personal issue. So thank you very much for your time. Greatly appreciate it. First off, can you please introduce yourself, your personal history, but then also what you're working on now?
Okay, so my name is Deborah Kan, and I'm the co-founder and I'm the founder and executive editor of Being Patient. Being Patient is a media company, a health media company, where we are building single subject platforms on longer term illness to really go deep into a topic and give people the right type of information they need that is completely editorially independent.
Great. So how'd you get into this? Like, what's your own personal background, and then what drove you to start this new company?
So I was an editor at the Wall Street Journal and worked there for quite a few years. I was responsible for video and multimedia in Asia and building out the video operation. And at that time, my mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And I didn't know much about Alzheimer's. I actually didn't really have any contact with Alzheimer's other than friends who had told me their grandparent or their parents had suffered from the disease. So I didn't really know a lot about the disease. I did what most people do, which is to do a simple Google search, and found that led to actually more confusion around making sense of where this disease is at, where the research is there going to be a cure? All of that information, I found it very hard to figure out on one page. It was like you'd get bits and pieces. So I decided, I started to call people as a journalist would, and I was calling researchers, I was calling all sorts of people and asking them questions about this disease, and I ended up mapping it out. I mapped the pathology of the disease, and I started to plug in information that I had found out through talking to so many people. And I learned very quickly a lot that wasn't readily available to me or in a comprehensive way.
So what was the problem? Like you said, you had little pieces. Everything's on the internet. It's all available for. Is it just too much? Is
Yes.
it too conflicting? What was the
part of the problem is that there's too much information out there, and it's hard. We've almost lost the ability to give people basic information and knowledge. Instead, we just grab articles and they come at you so quickly, right? And I found, especially when you're talking about a disease that doesn't presently have a cure, there's so much research out there, but there's a lot of contradictions, and that's what makes it really difficult. So, for example, one research study would say, drink 2 glasses of wine. It's actually really good for your brain. It clears the plaques from your brain. It offsets the onset of Alzheimer's. And then you'd have another study that says, don't drink at all. It's really bad for your brain, And so then and that's how mainstream media will cover these topics, because they're not in these topics deeply, right? They're covering them on occasion. So it leads to a lot of confusion. And then what I found is there was no one who was making clarity of the topic. So with that example, there's actually a lot of differences in those studies, right? There's the difference in demographics, there's the difference in location, there's the difference in how they were measuring drinking. There was just a lot of differences. And so our editorial approach is actually one where we give people the information we feel is necessary in the context of where the disease is at.
Okay. And in that sense, you mentioned kind of the demographics of some of these studies are always different. So for example, would you say that in a sense you have to make your way through the information knowing the context of your own, say your mother, being from a certain place at a certain age of a certain ethnicity, or what, like the different biometrics, is that helpful so that you can make your way through, or how are you trying to make sure that people get the right context for their situation?
Okay, well, what we're doing is we are creating an entirely different media model. And prior to launching Being Patient, I spent almost a year just surveying the community of patients and caregivers, primary care doctors, and researchers, and understanding where information was failing people. And depending on who you spoke to, the case was, most of the patient caregiver population, we were angry at their primary care doctors because they felt like they weren't getting the time and the information they needed to truly understand. I mean, you get a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, it impacts the entire family. It's not just the patient. How do I deal with this disease? Is there going to be a cure? Where is this disease? And what does this mean? How does it present itself? So we mapped where information was failing people. The researchers, for example, told us that they didn't have enough connectivity to the caregiving population. The caregivers hold a wealth of information to them. So when we mapped all of this out in the information problems, we found a lot of it was connectivity, and it was addressing the right type of information. So actually what we've done is we have a constant feedback loop. We not only go out to groups that we've aligned ourselves with now to tell them that we're there, but we go into their forums and we say, give us your questions and we'll get the answers. And so our editorial directive actually comes from a community of people in need of information where they are directing us on the topics they want to know about, rather than us telling them what they should know about.
How do you do that? Like what's the best medium for people to learn and feel like they're getting the right answers, but also in a way like 34 pages?
Well, and that's why we feel like what we do is we're explaining the research to people in a very digestible way. I mean, part of the problem, and what we found, interestingly enough, is a lot of people assume that, when you're in a disease like Alzheimer's, people don't care about the research unless you have answers, because what's the point? But what I have actually found is that's not true. People do care. They care, but they don't understand, right? And so there's no place they go where they can where they feel like, okay, that makes sense now I understand it. So we produce a lot of our own content, but some of it is aggregated. And when we aggregate content, we always put our editorial we always put context around it. So when we feel like there's more explanation that's needed, when there's context needed, and how it relates to the disease or what aspect or how science is approaching this, that is where we are providing the context.
How important is it for people of this community to see people that they recognize from their own challenge, but then also have access to the doctors, and maybe can they ask you questions that you could then ask them?
Absolutely, and that's one of the things we do is we call it you asked, we got the answers, right? It's so and you mentioned a gentleman with early onset named Brian Kersonis. He is featured in a podcast that we've created, and the reason why we're featuring stories of patient and caregivers, and hence the name Being Patient, is I often feel like a huge conversation exists about health and a disease like Alzheimer's, but the patient's voice is often in the background. And so I felt it's really important to not only elevate what their need is for information, but elevate their voice into the conversation on health. So it's this happy marriage between giving people a platform to tell their stories, but also giving them the answers to the information that they're seeking.
How did your background as a reporter help to, what tools were you bringing to this that were just immediately, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, so you can start to build that platform?
So I think a couple of things. One was, I've always been very entrepreneurial, and I've only worked in the context of big companies for launches. Okay, so years ago, I was hired to launch Star TV's first English newscast, right? And that was a whole launch. Later, I went to Thomson Reuters to launch Reuters Insider, which was a proprietary financial news channel for Reuters. And then I was hired by the Journal to launch the whole video operation in Asia, which didn't really exist. So I have always been extremely comfortable taking nothing and turning it into something.
Okay.
When I was at the Journal and I was realizing there was a huge opportunity in health that wasn't being addressed, and I was experiencing that firsthand, I kept thinking that this was something that I wanted to do. This is something I could do because it was an information problem, and I know how to solve information problems.
Sure.
Interestingly enough, I'd never worked out of the context of a big company. So in the year where I was formulating how to do this, I worked with this company called News Deeply, and they build single subject news platforms. And I launched, in partnership with the Gates Foundation, a whole platform on women and girls in the developing world.
Okay.
And so that actually gave me the skills that I needed to fill in, like I've always worked for organizations that had huge followings and huge platforms for me to address the content. But now when we launched Women and Girls, I learned quickly how you cultivate a community around a topic and bring them to your platform. So that was hugely useful.
So you get to play a little bit with somebody else's issues that you were and bring those skill sets and then learn through that.
Yeah,
right?
completely. Okay. And it taught me a lot, and that's in part, I'm very grateful to News Deeply because, our model is a little bit different from what they're building, but it really taught me about how you get people on your platform and you engage them through information.
So you have Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, a blog, and a podcast as your what are some of the lessons you learned about how you bring them onto the platform? And are you trying to get them from one to get onto all six? Or is a major one? Like, what are some of the tactics that you learned through this?
You can't get them all there at one time, but what you can do is you can engage them on one that will hopefully turn into unique views onto the other one. But what we've learned quickly is, what's been amazing to me is the huge amount of support I've gotten. We're only 2 months old, and the thing I wasn't expecting was the scientific community has really rallied behind me, and a lot of the associations have, because what I'm giving to the equation is something they're not giving, which is really credible, good content that's editorially independent. And so what I've learned is those people, you have similar intentions, right? Our intention is to get better information to people. I'm the content creator. They have platforms with huge followings.
Sure.
So it's the ability to have them incubate you. And so I become a content creator almost to help some of these organizations and therefore growing my base. But I think with media in general, it's like you need to have a clear cut strategy, but you're not going to be everything to everyone.
Right.
It's just impossible.
And that's actually because a lot of people would run into the fire right now and just try and do it all. It sounds like you're guarded in the sense like you don't want to dilute the quality of the content and maybe fail the community. What are some of the things that you struggle with in terms of like how fast you go? Because you must want to answer these questions for people as fast as possible, but also make sure that you do it in the right way for them, because it is such a personal thing. So what are some of the ways that you balance that?
And this is where we're at right now. Like we're only 2 months old, right?
Yeah.
So in some ways it's a really fun time because we're testing a lot of different things. But again, we're going to let the community tell us which direction to go in. What works, then that's the direction we're heading into. The Q&A, what we're trying to build right now, is my instinct from people asking. we're already being viewed as an authority on the matter, so people are automatically sending us questions, right? I got a message from a reader who wanted me asking us if we knew of any scientific studies on a specific herb that he used that really helped with his mother's hallucinations, right? And right away we got an answer, and so it's that type of connectivity and having people view us as a credible source to give them good, reliable information. There's surprisingly a lot of mistrust in this space. I think that's along the lines of the fake news, or not so much, it's not really blatant fake news, but what do you believe and what don't you? What's attached? Like everything we report on is attached to a credible study. Right. We're not going to put anything out there that maybe someone thinks this works, but who knows? It has to have a substantial study attached to it.
And then how do you think from a business model? I mean, the media system right now is really struggling to find its next business model. How does that dynamic challenge you, or how is that your opportunity going forward?
Well, I have approached this, and whether it's right or the wrong way to do it is, I am not going to be specific about my business model until I know exactly what's working. And so I have several great advisors where we're on the phone probably out with one of them every day, and we're hashing out different scenarios. For me, though, my mission is to leave the information free and open to all. I don't want to put it behind a lock and key. I want people to have access to this information. Sure. One of the things we're modeling out is there room for a premium model in this, where we enhance that connectivity through virtual and live events. But again, we're so early that I'm very much focused on growing the traffic and understanding what's working before I say, this is our business model.
Right. And then how do you know what's working? Is it because the website numbers are going up? It's because you're getting more questions?
All of the above. So what we're tracking is how many likes and followers we get. We're tracking how people are utilizing our content, how many subscribers we're getting for our emails. I mean, it's early days, but I have to say that I had the instinct that there was a huge need, and the numbers are proving that. I mean, our growth is incredibly healthy for a 2-month-old company. So I mean, we're plowing the course. We're seeing on a weekly basis about an 8 to 10% growth. In media numbers, that's huge, right? But again, we're still early days. Sure. And so is that rate sustainable? I think it is, and I hope it is. So we will see.
Last question. What's success for you as you look out? I know you're only 2 months old.
No, but I'm so glad you asked this question, because I was having this conversation with my husband, and I say, the weird thing about being an entrepreneur is that the first thing people ask you is, what's your business model? What's your business model? And, I never got into this to make $1 billion. Like that's the farthest thing from my mind. And I get frustrated sometimes because I'm confronted all the time with like, well, what's your business model? How are you going to monetize this? And I really wish people would ask me, how many lives have you helped today? How many people have you helped today? Because for me, that's a better measure of success. It's not, oh, how are you gonna turn this into the next unicorn? That, and maybe you're not supposed to say that as an entrepreneur, but that's truly how I feel. I'm not doing this to be the next unicorn. I'm doing this because there's an entire population of people who need better information. So if I can change just a percentage of those people and make it a better place for them when they're going through a disease, a long-term illness such as Alzheimer's, then I think that's success.
Me anyway.
Yeah. All right. So welcome back, everybody. I'm here with Deborah Kan, who is the founder of Being Patient. It is a new media company that is basically trying to help those with questions about Alzheimer's to answer those questions about the research. She's trying to develop a community. It's really engaging and learning from a personal issue and how to take things